Hey guys, this is Harry from ZeroFX, and in this video, I will break down my process of recreating this I Am GROOT intro completely inside After Effects without using any plugins. So let's do this. First, as I could not find a similar font online, I created a new shape layer and created the entire text using pen tool. Once that's done, I gave it a green color. Enabled 3D, opened the composition settings and changed the renderer to Cinema 4D renderer. This enables the geometry options for the shape layer. And here I changed the bevel style to angular and also gave it some extrusion depth. This makes the text three-dimensional. Then I added a spotlight from the top and another spotlight from the bottom, and this finished the text. So I pre-composed everything and named it text underscore cinema 4D. Now it's time to create these vine shapes. So I created another shape layer and using pen tool I created a simple spline shape like this. Then I deleted the fill property and gave it a very small stroke width. Then I made the shape layer 3D and under geometry options, changed the bevel style to convex and also increased the bevel depth. This makes the spline cylindrical in shape. For the lighting, I added one spotlight from the top, which acts as a key light highlighting the cylindrical surface, one point light from the bottom that acts as a fill light, and one ambient light to fill up the rest. As you can see here in the original, in order to make the vines look convincing, we need multiple branches with some three-dimensional twisting. Well, obviously we cannot do 3D twisting inside After Effects, so I need to fake it somehow. So I duplicated this shape layer and moved the duplicate a bit forward in Z-axis. Then duplicated it again and moved it even more forward. So this positions the branches like a stack on top of each other, like this. Then using the pen tool, I adjusted the spine points of each shape, like this, one point to the right, one point to the left, kind of like a zigzag manner. So this gives an illusion of a three-dimensional twisting. In the same way, I created all the remaining vine shapes based on the original intro. Now, in order to create this vine growing animation, I added a trim path effect and animated the endpoint. There you go. Okay, now comes the problem. As you can see here, the advancing end of the vines are supposed to be pointed, but my vines are not pointed and are rather blunt in shape. So to fix this was actually supposed to be easy. I went into the stroke options, there we can find taper properties, increase the end length to 100% and this should do it. But it didn't work. Well, this is because we're actually tapering the stroke, but the stroke width is actually set to a very small value, and that's not the one responsible for spline thickness. In fact, the spine is actually getting all its thickness from the bevel options. And unfortunately, there are no options to taper the bevel property. However, if I decrease the bevel depth and increase the stroke width, there you go, now it's working. The end is pointed and we are also getting a nice taper effect, but the spine completely lost its cylindrical surface and it is looking completely flat at the moment. So I have two options, either to go with a pointed tip with a flat surface or a blunt tip with a cylindrical surface. And I chose the third option, to combine them both. To do that, first I selected all the shape layers and pre-composed them together as vines. Then I went into this pre-comp, copied everything and pasted it in the main comp. Then I pre-composed them again and named it as vines underscore pointed. So inside the vines pointed pre-comp, I increased the stroke width, decreased the bevel depth, and under taper properties, increased the end length to 100% just like before to make the end pointed. There you go, like this. A pointed end with a flat surface. Then in the main composition, I positioned this below the vines pre-comp, and inside the vines pre-comp, I selected all the trim path animation keyframes and decreased the end percentage by 15%. So 80% becomes 65 and 100% becomes 85. So this offsets the trim path animation of the vines pre-comp related to the vines pointed pre-comp, creating something like this. Now to blend both these shapes a bit better, I went into the vines pointed pre-comp and under taper properties of the stroke, I made the end length 0 and increased the stroke width till it matches the other shape. Like this. So after matching the width, I increased the end length just a bit to make the end pointed. This made it look a lot better than before, but still the blending doesn't look seamless. So for that, I went into the vines pre-comp, copied everything again and pasted them again in the main comp. And I pre-composed them again together as vines underscore edge. And inside this pre-comp, I increased the end percentage of the trim path animation by 5% for both these keyframes. So 85 becomes 90 and 65 becomes 70. Now I also animated the start percentage of the trim path animation. So at the first keyframe 60% and at the last keyframe 80%. So this isolates only the end part of the spline shapes. So now we have a vines layer and a vines edge layer on top. Now I use this edge layer as an alpha inverted map for the vines layer and then added a fastbox blur effect to the vines edge layer to make the transition a bit smooth. To fix any blending artifacts, I also added a curves effect to the edge layer and increased the alpha channel. It's still noticeable but definitely a lot better than before. Okay, now I imported a tree bark image, precomposed it, gave it some rotation for no particular reason, added a motion tile effect to tile the texture. Then I precomposed all these vine layers together and named it vines underscore lighting and used that as an alpha matte for the texture. So this cuts the texture into these vine shapes. And then I added a vines lighting copy again on top, added a tint effect to make it black and white, and changed the transfer mode to overlay and then added a levels effect and increased the brightness to increase the lighting. So this gives a fake texture to the vine shapes. And also inside the texture precomp, I created a brown colored solid and multiplied the texture onto it, and also decreased the opacity. I did this to make the vines look kind of like an original intro. Now I need to make these vines go around the text shapes, which is again obviously not possible inside After Effects, so I need to fake it again. To do that, I first precomposed the vines together with its texture. Then duplicated the text precomp and used it as an alpha inverted map for the vines. So this positions all the vines behind the text layer. Then I selected the text precomp and added some masks like this. So this way I specified the areas where I wanted the vine shape to go underneath the text. Okay, it's looking good, but it's missing something. Shadows. So to fake shadows, I precomposed these vines together with its alpha inverted map and named it vines for shadow. Then I duplicated it and to the bottom copy, added a drop shadow effect and made it shadow only. Then I copied this text layer with the masks, pasted it in the main comp and used it as an alpha inverted map for the shadows. This is to make sure that the vine shapes which are underneath the text are not casting any shadows on top of the text. Then I adjusted the mask shapes wherever necessary. I finally gave some softness to the drop shadow effect for some softer shadows and also gave some feather to the masks if needed, like here. Alright, now I also need to add the contact shadows of the text onto the vines. For that, I duplicated this text with the masks layer and moved it to the top. Then I added a drop shadow effect to this and increased the softness. Then I added a set matte effect and set the matte to vines for shadow layer. This way shadows will be casted only onto the vine shapes. I also modified the mask shapes if needed, just like before. Okay, that's looking good. Then I created a background, just a white solid with a vignette on top, precomposed all the layers together as text, duplicated it, made the bottom copy 3D, rotated it, scaled it vertically, added a tint effect, made it black, added a radial blur effect, added a CC slant effect, and also added some blur and decreased opacity to finish the ground shadow. For the leaves, I made a simple leaf shape using mask and then added a gradient on top of it. In the main comp, I positioned it wherever appropriate and animated the scale, and that's basically it. And with this, we're done.
Are you